Hey everybody, I kind of wanted to start out my presentation tonight and have you imagine yourself sitting in a giant auditorium in front of a huge group symphony. Each person has a role in that symphony. Each instrument has a sound that it makes. Many of the instruments can make different sounds, but all of those things come together for a bigger purpose, to make beautiful music, to put on a great show for us. I kind of relate that to a car engine. A lot of parts that work together for a bigger purpose. Cars are a huge aspect of our lives, right? We use them every day. We want them to stay clean. We want them to look good. We want them to be reliable for us. There's hundreds of different vehicles on the road, so there's tons of different kinds. But if you're able to understand the bigger picture, you can apply this principle and this presentation to a bunch of those engines and to a bunch of those cars. Having this knowledge could benefit you in the future to maybe if you have mechanical failures, maybe something happens to your car and you have to explain what's wrong with your car to your mechanic, and this could help. Maybe the mechanic's trying to talk to you and you can understand him a little bit better, and I think this presentation will help that. But I want you to just understand the overall picture. But a little bit about myself. I'm Jordan Ward. I got my first car when I was in high school, and it needed a lot of work. So I took it over to the auto mechanics shop at the high school, and I started working on it. I worked at the auto mechanics shop for 2 years at the high school. And then I did it in ISU, and I also did auto body work there. Now I kind of just do it as a hobby, and I really like that more, is just doing it as a hobby. But while I was in high school, I also established the Classic Customs Car Show. It's a car show that's been going on for 10 years now. I'm also part of a Classic Customs Car Club here in Idaho Falls. I've been able to restore cars. I've been able to restore my own car. It's been a lot of fun to do that. In this presentation, though, I kind of just want to go over the bigger picture of an engine. I'm going to put up some visual aids on a slideshow, and you'll be able to see those basic parts of an internal engine that an internal combustion engine that we're going to go over today. And then I want to break down each part a little bit. And then I kind of want to do analogies to help you relate it to maybe something that you know better, so you can understand this a little bit better. So in this first section, if you want to go to slide 3, we're going to try and look at a car's engine without the entire shell on it. We're just going to take the engine right on out. And we're going to be talking about internal combustion engines today. Internal combustion engines make heat energy and they convert it into kinetic energy. In this case, the pistons are going to be moving up and down. There's explosions going on, and it converts it to the tires moving. Internal, and in this case, the kinetic energy would be the movement of the pistons. But in slide 4, if you enter that one, that will kind of show us all the parts of the engine. At the top of the engine, or the top of the cylinder, there's spark plugs, and depending on how many cylinders is how many spark plugs you're going to have in the engine. Inside each engine, there's the cylinder, so the portion of where the explosions happen, and the pistons at. Now, you can kind of relate this depending on how many cylinders there are in a car. That makes it a 4-cylinder, that makes it a 6-cylinder, or a 8-cylinder, and so forth. And even though there can be more or less cylinders, all these principles will apply to it. Inside each individual cylinder, there will be a piston on slide 6, and then these pistons just go up and down. Every piston is connected with a connection rod to the crankshaft at the bottom of the engine, and this crankshaft goes throughout the entire engine, and at the end of it, on the outside of the engine, you'll have a flywheel, and that flywheel is connected to the transmission. So now that we've kind of seen the overall big picture and of that visualization of each part, now let's kind of break it down a little bit on each part. So why do we use combustion engines? The The U.S. Department of Energy says internal combustion engines provide outstanding drivability and durability, with more than 250 million highway transportation vehicles in the United States. So a lot of them use these internal combustion engines. Now, combustion is just a basic chemical process. So it's taking gas and air and the mixture of it, and it's making a little explosion happen in your car. The Department of Energy continues, and they say, in an internal combustion engine, the ignition and combustion of the fuel occurs within the engine itself. So that's why it's internal. The engine then partially converts the energy from the combustion, so from that explosion, to do work for you. The fuel and air mixture is pulled into the cylinder by this chemical process, and then after the explosion happens, it's released through the exhaust. The function of the spark plug it's really simple, but it's really important. It plays a big role in the overall purpose of it, but it creates a very strong electrical spark, strong enough to ignite that fuel in the cylinder head. And then it causes that small explosion in the cylinder. The cylinder is the area in the middle that we kind of talked about that has the piston, but it contains that explosion, so it has to be really strong. And again, depending on how many cylinders there are in a car, that's how many pistons we'll have. I found a website online called Engine Basics, and there was an article on there that said the pistons are one of the most important parts of an engine because they are the mechanism that contains the energy. So they take the energy from the explosion and convert it down in the crankshaft. But they also take a lot of abuse. The crankshaft is also very important, and all these parts sound important. But Michael Fernie, who is a general mechanic, wrote an article about a crankshaft and said that their job is to convert the vertical movement of the piston into the rotation to be transferred through the crankshaft into the flywheel, into the transmission that goes into the wheels and that turns your tires. And so that's important. We have the crankshaft and we have the flywheel that turns, and that turns the transmission gears, and then that goes and is converted to your tires. So I hope that helps a little bit with the understanding of what's going on. I have that PowerPoint that shows kind of how it happens and what goes on in slide 8. But I hope I can give you some analogies now that relate to you maybe a little bit better. You know, I talked about the symphony. We could also relate it to an assembly line. Assembly line is needed, has a ton of different parts, but if one part stops, then you don't get the end result. Or if one part stalls, the whole thing stops. And then one other analogy I want to relate it to is think about the crankshaft. How it has to be perfectly balanced. Think about a top and spinning it on the table. That top will spin fine until it starts wobbling. Then it will lose all its energy and it will stop and slow down. Same thing with a crankshaft. You want it to convert all that energy to the flywheel, to the transmission, to the tires. So I hope those analogies maybe make a little bit more sense to you. But I'd like to just conclude this and go over what we've kind of talked about today. I've given you some visual aids, told you some of the parts and pieces to an engine. We kind of dug into that a little bit. This is very basic internal combustion engine knowledge. But I just want you to remember next time you open a hood of a car to not be intimidated, to break it down. You can understand these things, you can work on them, you can apply this stuff to your life. So thank you very much.